How often do we offend our Creator by our sin? At any point does he stop forgiving us? I would certainly hope not, and the Bible is clear that he does not. As I said earlier, this is a radical concept that the world deems crazy. But there is a very simple reason for why, for the Christian, that he can and should forgive over and over again. It's because Christians are called to a life of mercy, not a life of justice. Further, this is not possible by your own human power. You must be infused by God's grace with the virtue of charity for this to even be possible. Without God's grace, you will demand justice when you are hurt. The desire for justice is not in and of itself sinful. God is just, but God has shown every Christian mercy. It's because of that and that alone that you are called to a life of mercy. St. Thomas Aquinas says the following regarding the life of mercy. But of all the virtues which relate to our neighbor, mercy is the greatest, even as its act surpasses all others, since it belongs to one who is higher and better to supply the defect of another, insofar as the latter is deficient. The sum total of the Christian religion consists in mercy as regards external works, but the inward love of charity, whereby we are united to God, preponderates over both love and mercy for our neighbor. Charity likens us to God by uniting us to him in the bond of love, wherefore it surpasses mercy, which likens us to God as regards similarity of works. So in showing mercy to others, Aquinas notes that we do two things. First, in our acts of mercy, we are acting similar to God himself. Second, in our acts of mercy, we are demonstrating that the virtue of charity that God gives us, which unites us to him. Now let's go back to Matthew 18 to see a concrete picture of this. The text reads, "Therefore is the kingdom of heaven likened unto a certain king, which would take account of his servants. And when he had begun to reckon, one was brought unto him, which owed him 10,000 talents. But for as much as he had not to pay, his Lord commanded him to be sold, and his wife and his children, and all that he had, in payment to be made. The servant therefore fell down and worshipped him, saying, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. Then the Lord of that servant was moved with compassion, and loosed him, and forgave him the debt. But the same servant went out and found one of his fellow servants, which owed him 100 pence. And he laid hands on him, and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me that thou owest. His fellow servant fell down at his feet, and besought him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. And he would not, but went and cast him into prison till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what he had done, they were very sorry, and came and told unto the Lord all that was done. Then his Lord, after that he had called him, and said unto him, O thou wicked servant, I forgave thee all that debt, because thou desirest me. Shouldest not thou also have had compassion on thy fellow servant, even as I had pity on thee? And his Lord was wroth, and delivered him to these tormentors, till he should pay all that was due to him. Now the first servant owes the king 10,000 talents. That is roughly the equivalent at this time of 160,000 years of an average person's wage. 160,000 years. The debt owed here is insane. Clearly, Jesus wants to make it clear that this debt was not possible for the servant to repay. But the king shows mercy and cancels the debt. We see that the forgiven servant goes and finds a fellow servant, an equal, who owes him 100 pence, roughly 100-day wages. 160,000 years, 100 days. Growing up in Union County, we may have not been the best at math, but you really don't compare, do they? The debt is certainly practical to pay off, as long as some modest patience is shown. However, the forgiven servant throws his fellow servant in prison. Instead of showing mercy, he shows justice. There's actually nothing on the surface that is sinful in this. But if the purpose is to protect yourself or there's actually nothing on the surface that is sinful in this servant's actions. But the king finds his servant and calls him wicked. The king's wrath is poured out on this servant, and he is thrown into jail. Why? Because he couldn't show a small amount of mercy when he had just been shown infinite mercy. What we see here in this parable is exactly what St. Thomas explains to us. We must be merciful because God has first shown us mercy. And when we show mercy, we display God's mercy. Further, we act in a way that shows the love that he has established by his grace in us. So ask yourself, do I in my relationships demand justice instead of giving mercy? When your neighbor repents of a wrong, do you still keep them at a distance? This is not easy, but no aspect of Christian life is easy. The Christian is told we must daily take up our cross. Does carrying a cross to your death sound easy? Committing yourself to forgiveness certainly is not easy. You will daily need God's grace to show the kind of mercy and love we see in Matthew 18. But it's this type of radical Christian living that makes us different, or at least should make us different from the world. In the name of the Father.